This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
Are you ready for the number one podcasting champion of the world, Rexwell?
You're listening to Beyond Bossfights, gaming, technology, movies, and more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Bossfights, episode 27. As you heard from the intro, this is a very special episode, and I'll tell you why. In January of 2014, Beyond Bossfights posted episode number 1. That means in January 2015, we had our 1-year anniversary. And what I did at that point was I made a compilation of kind of outtakes for a celebratory episode. Well, another year came and went, and I, didn't really have a lot of outtakes, and I didn't know what to do for a 2-year anniversary show. So I didn't do anything. I actually just made a regular episode for January of this year. But I had kind of an interesting idea driving down the road to work one day. I thought, I've had this podcast for a while now, and I've had a lot of really good guests and a lot of really interesting conversations over the years. But one thing I haven't really been able to do is to kind of catch everybody up with those great guests that I've had. And I thought to myself, what if I did a kind of quasi-reunion episode where I reviewed all of my episodes and caught up with a few of my guests to see what they're doing now and what they remember about doing the show. So what I'm going to do for this episode, it's going to be a little bit of navel-gazing. I want to do that every now and then. But I think you're really going to enjoy what we've got in store here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go an episode at a time, starting with episode 1. And I'm going to tell you what I remember about the episode, give you a little bit of behind the scenes, what I was thinking at the time, anything memorable that happened that stands out for me. And then we're going to listen to the guests from that episode, because I've had everybody who had time to do it go ahead and send me a recording of what they remember, what they're doing now, just to kind of catch us up. And then we can revisit the past 2.5 years of Beyond Bossfights, because that's the anniversary that I'm celebrating with this episode, episode 27. June of 2016 is my 2.5-year anniversary with the podcast. And I thought, what better way to kind of celebrate that milestone than to go back and revisit what we've done to this point. So if you haven't been with us from the beginning, some of this is going to be new to you, but you're welcome to go back and catch up if you'd like, especially after listening to the guests here. So let's go ahead and get started, and thank you for being with me for the last 2.5 years. Okay, episode 1. What do I remember from episode 1? Oh my goodness, I was so nervous. This was my first podcast that I was doing on my own. I remember trying to record the intro to kind of introduce myself, because normally when I interviewed somebody, I let them do the definitive gaming history. Well, episode 1 is where the definitive gaming history was born, but it was a term coined by my first guest, Andang, and I tried to kind of give people my gaming and technology history to kind of give some credence to what I was saying, because I was a brand new podcaster. Well, I had podcasted on Lotro players for a while, but this was my first time stepping out and doing something broader. But I remember trying to record that intro over and over and over, and I would try to get the whole thing right in one take instead of, I hadn't really figured out how editing worked very well yet. I knew how to cut things out, but I wasn't very good at the performance side of it. So instead of doing part of it and then going on and doing another part and splicing it together so it sounded better, I continued to just make a mistake, scrap the entire track, make a mistake, scrap the entire track. I probably did that about 15 times, because I got to a point where I just didn't know what to say. And then there would be this long pause, and then I'd stumble around, and then I'd start over. So that's one thing I remember about episode 1. The selection of Andang as a guest was very purposeful, I guess I would say, because I was already used to working with Andang on Lotro players, and we were already friends, so we kind of could feed off each other a little bit. Now, I don't know, in listening back to it, that it worked as well as I thought it would, but I think that was just because we were both trying to figure out what formula I was going for. To be honest, I hadn't really planned a whole lot for that episode. I pretty much pinged Andang on Skype one night. I said, do you have time to do a call for about 45 minutes? I want to try something out. And then we just talked over. In fact, when I looked back at my show notes for episode 1, I had show notes, but I didn't have a list of questions that I usually use to guide the conversation. So I'm not really sure where I pulled those questions from, but there wasn't quite as much planning going on as there were in some of the later episodes. Despite that, the topic was, will we grow out of gaming? And another good reason to have Andang on was because he is a much younger young man than I am. I'm an old dad, and Andang is in college, and so the idea was to kind of have a differing perspective. But the funny thing was, we didn't really have very different perspectives, I don't think. I asked him a few questions, and I kind of grew up a gamer, albeit in a different era. He kind of grew up a gamer, and it wasn't as kind of contrasting as I thought it might be, but it still worked out for a good first episode. Now, Andang was a podcaster, and he was lead director of Lotro Players at the time, and I believe since then he has now launched the Players Alliance Network, which has a few different fan sites, DDO Players. At one time, I think he still has Guild Wars Players, just not the podcast. So the site has Guild Wars Players. He's a very successful YouTuber, and he also is the mastermind behind Middle-earth Lore, which is the Middle-earth machinima kind of documentary-style educational lore series that I do voiceover work for, and it's really good stuff. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please do that. But I'm not going to ramble on about Andang anymore. I'm going to let him catch you up on what he's been up to and what he remembers about episode 1.
Hail and well met, Beyond Bossfighters. Andang here, just wanting to congratulate Braxwolf on 2.5 years. That is absolutely amazing. Before I go into some of the things that you suggested, I just want to congratulate you on all of your accomplishments, Braxwolf. You have been doing this for so long and have come such a far way in just a short little time. You've become part of a huge, huge gaming podcasting network, which has been awesome. You've put in a ton of time into that and definitely deserve a huge thanks for that. You've done a great honor to the gaming community, and that is absolutely fantastic. You've become an award-winning podcast, which is super awesome. I did not expect that when I guested on the first episode for multiple reasons. But seriously, you've come a long way, and your podcast really shows, and it completely deserves the awards that it has gotten. And really, you deserve more. So you get the Andang Award. Congratulations, Rax. You got the Andang Award. Also, you've been the voice of Middle-earth Lore, which I cannot thank you enough for. That has saved me so much time, and you're super awesome for dedicating your time to that when you're already super busy being an awesome dad and taking care of your family. Hats off to you, Brax. You're an amazing individual and have done so much for the community. Thank you so much. Now on to the stuff that you want me to talk about. So, first of all, listening back to the first episode, you were great, Brax. I realized that I've come a long way as a podcaster since I've been on your show. For one thing, I say infinitely less times. I can't believe how many times I was saying that 6 months into Lotro Players. It's crazy that I was doing that still so much. As far as the actual content of the first episode, we actually talked about if people will eventually outgrow gaming. And the more I've thought about it, I think it really comes down more to time. Just as you get older, you get more and more busy and can't make as much time for gaming and things like that. And yet, I think people will continue to play games just like they continue to watch movies or read books or do any other medium. And I don't think that time will change that. We're in a time where pretty much all age ranges play games. And I think we covered that topic pretty well on the actual episode. Go back and listen if you want to hear me be terrible at podcasting. And I think you'll really enjoy the topic that we had there. We also talked a little bit about VR, which we didn't cover in much depth, but we mentioned that that might be the thing that we play when we're in the retiring home, and it's the VR retiring home, and you can go all over the world while still being in your retirement home. I think that that is more likely than it was when we did that show. Facebook actually had, bought a major VR platform, the Oculus, and what they could do with VR could be absolutely amazing. Being able to travel to, say, the Grand Canyon or, places all over the world and do that from your retirement home would be just absolutely amazing. I can't even imagine how awesome that would be. As somebody who's cooped up inside, that would be fantastic. I think that is going to be more likely the way that things go. One thing that I'm wondering, though, is how that is actually going to affect Let's Plays and things like that, this entire online community of sharing games and things like that, because VR is very closed in and personal, and it's really just kind of more about, your own personal experience being drawn into this world. And I know that there are multiplayer games and things like that, but it's mainly very personal. And so I think until we get the Iron Man camera that basically does the face inside of the VR, that type of thing, we won't really be able to do Let's Plays or things like that, because there just is not a good setup for that right now. And I hope that at some point there will be a VR setup that allows for this kind of social experience to continue while still being able to experience VR. I think whoever makes that first headset will be miles away of the other competition. I think that will be just an amazing experience that they would be able to offer, because right now, even just watching highly edited videos of VR, it just looks like somebody's stumbling around the room, and it's very uninteresting to watch unless they fall over, in which case it's a kind of interesting of which I don't think most Let's Players want to depict themselves in. And so I find that kind of an interesting problem that needs to be solved, and when it is solved, I think it'll be fantastic. So we need an Iron Man VR. I think that would be super awesome. And I know I'm going way over your proposed time limit, Brax, but I'm going to keep going because I have a lot of stuff to say. So for those that don't know, I'm actually a senior in college right now. I only have one semester left after this summer, and I've noticed that I've, especially in the last few months, have gotten very different goals of things that I'd want to be doing after I graduate. Part of what has changed that is that I was trying to get an internship over the summer and was actually able to get said internship in a journalistic position, and that has really changed kind of what I've been wanting to do. I feel like that suddenly I find myself wanting to take things much more seriously and also cover more serious topics in different ways than I've ever covered anything before on either my channel or in writing or anything. And I think part of that is just simply getting older, but I think part of it has been just a process of trying to find out, what I want to do with the rest of my life. That's part of what you do in college, I suppose. And, I've had a basic idea, but I've not been actively trying to do it while I was still in college. And so over the summer, I'm hoping to drastically change some of the content I'm going to be doing. I'm still going to be doing my Let's Plays and things like that. Still going to be doing the podcast on Ultra Players. But I'm wanting to do a different style of content that covers more issues beyond just gaming, which I suppose, as you said in your first episode, is kind of why you wanted to create Beyond Bossfights in the first place. You're wanting to go beyond just the gameplay and discuss broader issues in gaming and life in general. And I think that's part of the reason why that this podcast is so successful, is because you go beyond just gaming and go in depth into topics that really matter and really affect people in major ways. And some of the interviews that you've had have absolutely proved that. You've had some amazing people on this show, and a big thanks to all of them for coming on as well, because they had fantastic things to add to your conversation, Brax. And so I suppose one of the things that I want to take from that discussion that I just dragged all of you along with is, do we outgrow content creation? And if we don't outgrow content creation, do we change the content that we make as we get older? I think at the very least, we do change the content we make as we get older. We want to cover things in a different way. And, it's not true for everyone. Some people continue to do the exact same content. And I feel like that is awesome. It's more just what works for you as a content creator. And nobody is the same. Some people will outgrow gaming. Some people will outgrow content creation. It depends on the individual. And I think that is ultimately the main point that I'm trying to drive home from this entire discussion, is that I believe that everyone's different. And some people will outgrow things and other people won't. And that's just part of life. And it's awesome that people are so different. It makes life much more interesting than it would be otherwise. So anyway, Rex, thank you so much for allowing me to be your first guest on the show. I can't wait to hear your next episode and all your future episodes, to hear what you do next. You do such a great job, and you should really be proud of yourself. It's absolutely amazing what you have done here. My hat's off to you, good sir. Congrats on winning the Andang Award, and I will see you again real soon.
Okay, episode 2. So I pulled episode 2 from my topic list. I wanted to do a show about women in gaming. And bear in mind, this was before Gamergate, so tensions were not as inflamed as they are now, and especially during that period of Gamergate, but they've always been a little bit high. I didn't want to do an inflammatory show. I didn't want to do a controversial show. I didn't want to do a clickbait type of show. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more middle ground, a little bit more representative, I think, of what most of the silent majority experiences. And so for that episode, I pulled a very intelligent and thoughtful and kind person as my guest, Whiteberry, who I knew from playing Lotro and from on Twitter. Now, Whiteberry and I have always gotten along great, and she is a really one of my Twitter role models. Whenever I get a little bit agitated and I want to fire off some kind of tweet, I try to think to myself, what would Whiteberry do in this situation? But I thought she would be a fantastic guest for this type of topic that could potentially be one that was very charged. And she absolutely didn't disappoint. I found out after the fact that this was Whiteberry's first experience podcasting. And I was blown away, honestly, because she was so comfortable on the microphone. I also remember that this was my first scheduling challenge, as Whiteberry is a resident of Denmark, and time zones for between the United States and Denmark are very, very different. My schedule being the way it is, I unfortunately don't have as much scheduling leeway as I would like to have for my guests. So it's very tough to kind of get everybody together. I've talked about that before, but this was really the first time that I encountered that. But scheduling differences aside, I was really happy with how episode 2 came out. I was a little bit more organized for this one. I felt like we had an intelligent adult conversation. I thought that Whiteberry was probably a better representative of a woman gamer than some of the more popular YouTube and Twitch streamers that are vying for eyeballs and attention. So it was great to have her on, and I thought it was a really great follow-up to the pilot episode.
Hello, Braxwolf and everyone, Barry here. Thank you for inviting me to contribute to this reunion, and congratulations on the anniversary! Woohoo! I recall our talk about girls in gaming from the start of 2014 keenly. I had never been a guest on a podcast before, and it was so much fun to try. Braxwolf, you are an unbelievably graceful host, and I felt I was in very safe hands. When we talked, I was playing Lord of the Rings Online almost exclusively, and I decided to quit the game a few months after the podcast, and it has been a really good decision for me. It was actually a bit surprising to myself, but I haven't looked back. I haven't played any other MMOs either since, unless you count Landmark, which is in beta at the moment, and Twitter, which I also consider an MMO. But I have played a lot of survival and strategy games and enjoying that very much. We talked about how I had signed up for Camelot Unchained Alpha, and I've had a chance to test it over the last years, and still very excited about it. Anticipating the launch of beta. I've also fallen in love with an excellent independent survival game called The Long Dark, which is in early access sandbox at the moment, and its mix of artistic and realistic environment and survival has completely enthralled me. As for the podcast topic, then Girls in Gaming was and is an interesting subject and close to heart of many people, including myself. Which is one of the reasons I remember appreciating talking about it in a non-aggressive and grounded venue like Beyond Bossfights. I really enjoyed that. The subject is still relevant, and my thoughts on it haven't changed that radically since our talk, but my approach has, I guess. I try to avoid talking genders online altogether, because it's nearly impossible to have any sort of respectful public dialogue about subjects like this, particularly in the wake of Gamergate. It will almost without exception turn nasty and unproductive, these discussions. And I think with age, my tolerance of single-minded opinions, whichever side they're on, has evaporated. I just don't have the patience for it anymore, I think. More than anything, I feel that extremities seem to be the expectation during discussions, and most people are concerned about determining whether they should back you or trash you, rather than entering a dialogue and perhaps finding some middle ground. I still feel the majority are the ones in the middle, but staying silent as myself, pretty much. The drama is possibly also the main reason MMOs don't appeal to me these days, but it has very little to do with gender. All in all, if I should take on a crusade, then it would be the online communication, improving discussions and respect for others' right to have an opinion, even if you don't respect the opinion, rather than taking one side or another for a specific topic. Lastly, I would like to thank you for providing the Beyond Bossfights episodes and the thoughtful discussions that both entertain and enlighten me. So, thank you very, very much, and congratulations again.
So for episode 3, I decided to go for broke, and I took a chance and invited as my guests Merrick and Golden Star from the recently departed Casual Stroll to Mordor podcast. And if you're not familiar with the Lotro community, you might not know who Merrick and Golden Star were, but as a podcaster, they were one of the major influences in me trying out this whole medium. So it was kind of a big deal for me to contact them. I didn't know them personally. I felt like I knew them pretty well from listening to their show, but I'm sure they had no idea who I was. Episode 3 was the first time I actually scripted the intro to my show, because I wanted to make sure whatever it was I said at the beginning was exactly what I meant to say. I didn't want to slip up and say something stupid. Once American Golden Star agreed to be interviewed, I spent a whole lot of time trying to figure out what questions to ask them. In fact, I can remember at the time I was running out an indoor track 3 nights a week, and I would just be going over and over in my head, okay, what questions do I want to make sure I ask so I don't forget and leave something out on the table there after the interview's over. So I was actually pretty nervous, and you can probably tell when you listen to the show now that I wasn't exactly at ease. I was really trying to be professional. American Golden Star, what I didn't realize, I guess at the time, and I probably should have, was being the veteran podcasters that they are, pretty much just took every question and ran with it. And to be honest, I almost didn't need to be there. It was just almost a continuation of Casual Stroll to Mordor with just a few different types of questions thrown in. thing I remember about the show was at the very beginning, I was trying to go through some things, again, trying to be very professional. Okay, don't worry if you say something that you don't want. Just let me know. I can edit it out, whatever. And I can remember Golden Star's reaction being, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll just leave everything in. And I just thought, yeah, idiot. They know they know how podcasting works. Let's just do the show. Anyway, the topic of the show was about gaming and life balance. How do you balance your life with gaming and content creation and all kinds of other things? And it was one of the first times I realized that the show could be more than just a topical show. It could actually start diving into the lives and personalities of gamers, and American Golden Star were a great introduction to that concept for me. And there were several other episodes where I did that as well. So it became one of the staples of Beyond Boss Fights to not only talk about a topic, but also to bring kind of the gamer to the forefront, putting a face to the gamer, so to speak.
Hi, this is Merrick.
I'm Golden Star.
And we are making the worst recording ever, so we apologize for that offhand. Ironically, we were contacted by Braxwolf to make a audio recording about what we're doing now and life-work balance. And here we are recording this a day after it's due because I apparently have no life-work balance.
We're in the car on the way to work and making a recording so that we can still help our friend Braxwolf and feel okay about being so late.
Yes, so what we've been doing now, let's see. I guess games I'm playing as far as video games would be mostly Blizzard games. Hearthstone when I'm walking around during the day. Diablo sometimes. I've just tried out Overwatch, and it's not bad. I've decided I'm still terrible at first-person shooters, but they have an option to be healer, which I like to call the old man option because you have to be behind everybody and just shoot your own teammates. So it might be something you like too.
Okay, I can do that.
Because you did that in Halo with your brother anyways.
Yeah.
And he was on your team.
He was on my team.
And you shot him.
Well, he looked like a bug.
And let's see. I don't know. I went through the first two Arkham Knight games, I guess you want to say, the Batman games. So Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. And I'm waiting for a sale on Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight before I go through those, and I've enjoyed those. Those were fun. I don't know. Okay, what about you?
I'm playing Locho with the Dom still. I am a level 100 burglar, and that's still fun. I still do the iPhone games more than anything, and they switch all the time. I was really, really into Fallout Shelter, like totally into Fallout Shelter. That game was awesome. And I played the Tomb Raider. I loved that. And
both Tomb Raiders.
Yes. I'm thinking recently, though. And then I don't know what else I've been doing. I got one of those Steam controllers. It was kind of weird. I'm getting used to it, but when I started, I'm like, this doesn't fit my hand, and I hate it, and it's horrible. But I'm okay now. But, still trying to find time to... Oh, one thing that we're doing is not really video games, is we're playing Dungeons and Dragons now.
Yeah, we started up a family group where we have Golden Star is the GM, and then her brother, her sister, baby Hobbit, who is 7 now.
7.
And Golden Star's mom and dad, who I think are just playing because their kids are playing.
Right.
And because baby Hobbit's playing.
Basically.
And it's fun. We've done 2 sessions so far. We're going through one of the...
It's a starter pack.
We're going through the starter packs, pre-made, what's it called? I forget what they're called now.
Campaign?
Pre-made campaign, yes. And it's fun. We're having a lot of fun. Her brother is min-maxing. He still thinks he's a monk from Dark Age of Camelot.
Dark Age of Camelot doesn't have... He's EverQuest.
Well, he also did Dark Age of Camelot. Remember, he had the monk that would heal or whatever. They held the staff. They weren't called a monk, but they held a staff, and they could tank and heal at the same time.
Well, he thinks he's awesome, and he's level 2.
Right. And let's see. Golden Star got a promotion at work, so she's super busy. She's a manager now. I don't remember when. Oh, well, I got a different job within the state. And then I switched again, and I'm not doing server stuff anymore, but I'm doing infrastructure assistance planning. I don't know how to relay it to people.
So we're busy, but it's a constant struggle to work-life balance, but we're getting there.
Yeah, every day is a different day.
Well,
of the same.
Congratulations on 2.5 years.
See ya.
In episode 4, we kind of continued the trend of learning about the gamer and about the creative process of the gamer specifically. I had on my show someone from the Lotro community. Can you see a theme here? At the time, I knew a lot of Lotro players and not a lot of other types of gamers. We had someone from the Lotro community who was doing machinimas with a specific character. It was almost like a variety show called An Unexpected Vidcast, and it had a hobbit named Pashbo Proudfeet, who was kind of the MC of the whole deal. And he would go on adventures, and he would sometimes read poems, sing songs, sometimes that he had bands from the Lotro community on. And it was just a really cool little show. And I wanted to kind of dive into Pash's mind and see what it was that inspired him to be the creator that he was. There wasn't a lot of people that I knew doing machinima at the time. And it was really cool to get to know Pash. And again, this was his first podcast. Again, another thing that I didn't really realize until after I started talking to him just before the episode, I think. But it seemed like everything went really well. I was really impressed with the show. He was quite nervous at the beginning, especially considering he was following up Merrick and Golden Star, who were basically considered Lotro royalty at the time, and it was kind of a funny position for him to be in. But we had a great time, and I really enjoy Pash. And his name is Mark Freak, but at the time he was wanting to go by Pash for the Lotro community. But I learned a lot of things about Pash, and the fact that he was very creative outside of the Lotro community and the video gaming community as well.
Well, hello, Beyond Bossfights. It's Pash, or Mark Freak here. Looking back at it, it's quite hard to believe, actually, that it's that long ago that we recorded episode 4 of your Beyond Bossfights podcast, which is all about machinima. So April 2014 it was. It was a phase that I hadn't even heard of before Brax asked me onto the show. At that point, I was actively presenting a Lord of the Rings online vidcast, I guess, which was called An Unexpected Vidcast. And it was a show that was made up of short stories, poems, songs, and other bits and bobs that are related to hobbits, elves, dwarves, and occasionally men. And it involved filming sequences with my, sort of plethora of alts. I guess it's a sad story in many ways because unfortunately I had to stop doing the vidcast. Mainly, however much I enjoyed doing it, it was quite time intensive, and I found it quite difficult to balance doing the vidcast with family life, really. It used to get released every Sunday, and pretty much the whole of that Sunday would be spent writing the segments, filming the segments, and getting it out as quickly as possible. And I guess anyone that watched the vidcast would have noticed that gradually they got shorter and shorter as I discovered quite how intensive it was on my time. I say it was quite hard on getting the balance with family life. I guess that's not entirely true. I think probably more than anything, I found it hard to manage to get the time to do the vidcast, do the family stuff, but also get a sufficient amount of gaming time in. And I became quite conscious that my Lord of the Rings online characters were not leveling very fast. Although I haven't been doing the vidcast, I've hopefully kept the creative process going, though. In the time since I was on Beyond Bossfights, I've written a couple of books. So first one, Farmer Peters and His Underworld Adventure, which is available on Amazon, and also a short poem called A Hungry Monster for Christmas. And I'm actually partway through 2 news stories, and I've also got the skeleton storyline planned for Farmer Peter's follow-up. But it's time. Time is the worst enemy I have. As if that's not enough, I also have an active rock and roll band on the go, and I have done for quite a few years now, actually. I think actually we're approaching our 15th year soon, which is a bit scary. It's called Freak Circus, and it's a sort of alternative, punky-edged band. Alternative rock band, and you can catch our CDs on Amazon, or you can find sort of the occasional tracks sat there on YouTube. And I also have an acoustic David Bowie cover band. So those 2 things keep me pretty busy as well. So as I say, both those books and the CDs are available on Amazon. I think the other thing time-wise was, as my son Lewis has grown up, and I mean, he's now 12, and he's become ever more creative himself. And I spend quite a lot of time helping him make his YouTube videos, and he's got his own YouTube account. So although it's not machinima, I have been helping him with his action figure adventures, particularly in terms of doing some of the editing with him. We also do a joint Doctor Who podcast every Saturday called Doctor Who Time and Space. Now, my lad Lewis is completely obsessed with Doctor Who. He loves it. And although I don't really know everything about it, I really enjoy watching it with him, and I enjoy being there as the helper really on the podcast. He does all the clever know-it-all bits, and I sit around and occasionally make a fool of myself, I guess, with my lack of knowledge. But it's a brilliant thing to do. I love doing that with him. And then in addition to that weekly podcast, we also do occasional vidcasts called Behind the Sofa, where we will analyse Doctor Who stories over the years and give our views on them. So if anyone really wants to check those out, I mean, he'd love it. He loves it when he gets new viewers, and you should check out his YouTube account, and that's Mr. Lewis Moon. So if you can't get enough of hearing me sounding foolish, then come along and listen to that. I also have my own YouTube accounts, so I've got 2 active ones, I guess. Mark Freak Super Geek, that's Mark with a C, and that includes, amongst other things, my readings of my books, and occasionally I talk about my other interests, so things such as Game of Thrones and spaghetti westerns. And then I also have a YouTube account from a band, which is Freak Circus Band, where you can check out some of our songs. So I mean, going back to Beyond Bossfights, I mean, it was really great fun to guest on that, and Brax was a fantastic host and really enjoyable to talk to. I can remember when we did it, I was really nervous before the recording started, because I'd never done anything like that before. I mean, it probably sounds a bit silly, really, because through the band I've sung in front of hundreds of people, but there's something more nerve-wracking about talking to one person over Skype, and it just makes it far more challenging. But it was a really great experience, and of course, I guess I'm now doing that on a weekly basis with the boy, with our Doctor Who Time and Space podcast. As for Lord of the Rings Online, it's still really the only game that I play, other than the occasional foray into Football Manager. I did have most of the classes levelled up to level cap. Well, certainly a burglar, Pashpo Prowfeet, you may remember from the vidcast. Pashpo! A Little Master Pashadan, a Warden Pashrid, Minstrel Pashquar, and a Guardian Pashrin. You may notice a theme there, folks. They're all at level 100. I think Pashrid's just reached level 102, but I've still got a bit of work to do to get them up to date with the recent level cap. And I've got a Runekeeper and a Bjorning that are pretty close to levelling up to the top 2. And I think actually, although Lotro is a fair few years old now, it still certainly fills me with glee walking around Tolkien's locations, and of course beating the occasional orc senseless. So, final comments. Thanks, Brax, for inviting me onto your show, both the original one and also for this celebratory one. And congratulations on keeping it going. It's a really great podcast, really different from anything else you'll hear, and it covers a real variety of topics. So here's to the next year, and who knows, maybe sometime Pashpo Prowfeet, Chumley and the other unexpected vidcast regulars will return for some more machinima. Who knows? Take care, folks.
Okay, going to try and pick up the pace here a little bit, as I felt like the show really started to hit its stride right around this time. I had episodes 5 and 6 both on Gaming Community, and really it was just going to be one episode, but I just ended up recording so much material with Roger Edwards from Contains Moderate Peril that it ended up being enough to spill into 2, and I don't think I would ever do that again. It didn't really work. Not that the conversation wasn't good, but there was a really abrupt end and beginning point to both episodes, and there was a month in between the two, so I decided that wasn't really the best format to do that in, and never really split an episode once again. I don't have any audio from Roger at this point, but he did send some in that I'm going to play at the end of the show. Episode 7 I recorded with Leonor, who at the time was, I knew from the Lotro community. He was a podcaster on Lotro Reporter in the MMO Reporter Network. He's since gone on to do, as he explains in his audio, some new things on his own, on YouTube. And the thing I remember the most about the Leonor show, which was barriers to playing MMOs, was not so much the topic, but the fact that Leonor and I talked for like 2.5 hours to get an hour-long episode put out. And it was just a really good time. It was very easygoing. We knew each other really well. He made me laugh like right off the bat, and he kept doing goofy things like he'd leave the microphone to go get us something to drink right in the middle of us talking about something. And I don't know, it was a really good time, and I remember having a lot of fun during that recording. I don't remember a lot of what we talked about, but I remember thinking that hopefully it was an enjoyable episode for those of my listeners who knew both Leonor and I from our respective Lotro podcasts.
Hello everybody, this is Leonor, and I was once a guest on Beyond Bossfights. I'm also a Sagittarius, just so you know. So, since I was on that show, there has been quite a few things that I have done. Quite a bit to update here, so I guess I'll just kind of dive right in. When I did the Boss Fights episode, I was actually in a very, very low point in my life. Probably one of the lowest points that I have ever been in so far. And that needed to change, and the only person that's going to be able to do that is if I figure out something for myself to just completely shift gears and just go in that direction. My friend's son, who I used to take care of at the time, was always watching YouTube, just constantly watching YouTube. And he was basically watching YouTubers like PewDiePie and Markiplier, and I don't know if he was watching Jacksepticeye. I think he was. And there were a couple other people as well, but the main thing was he really loved to watch Minecraft, and that was just his TV and his show. And I had already been doing podcasting for a couple years around that time and started doing a little bit of YouTube stuff every once in a while. When a new game came out, I would do a review or something like that. So I was kind of used to the YouTube format, and I decided that YouTube doesn't really cost anything to do. I mean, if you have content like games, or if you can just put a webcam in front of you and talk about movies or something like that, the platform's pretty forgiving, and you can get on there and just do whatever the heck you want. So I decided to just kind of start doing that, and if anything, just to get used to talking in front of a microphone, and to kind of have a camera on me all the time. After a while, I decided, you know what? Okay, this is it. I'm going to start my own game YouTube channel. This is what I want to do. I see people doing this. This looks incredibly fun. And this is going to be a fun adventure for me. So I decided to just base a show around the stuff that I own and just kind of play through the games and just see where it takes me. If you want to get into anything YouTube related, you want to do a lot of content. You just get in front of the camera, get on the mic, and just start doing stuff. Because later on, when you start getting a lot better, somebody's going to notice. And that somebody was a YouTube network. A YouTube network is a company that basically gets a bunch of YouTubers and they kind of promote them, or they teach them how to promote themselves for a percentage of their revenue share for YouTube. That's what you pay them. Before Christmas, I found a video from Freedom that said that they were looking for people to find talent on YouTube and talk to them and see if they want to be a part of the network. So that's when I was hired on to Freedom. And then everything started getting bigger from that point. And it's still growing to this day with things that I'm involving myself in. I ended up going into the community team, which is to help people with their channels directly. And I'm there to actually directly give them feedback. And they love that stuff. So I've been doing that for about 3 or 4 months now. I think it's been about 4 months. And Freedom has actually put me on their social media team now as well. I did end up leaving MMO Reporter. It was starting to get too much. I really wanted to go the route of doing YouTube. And unfortunately, MMO Reporter was not in the cards. And it was sad that I had to go, but it was necessary. And hopefully one day, I will be able to be back on that show again and say hi to everybody. As for my YouTube channel itself, it's been going great. It's kind of like a blog or a vlog or even like a Dear Diary. If you're doing something like that daily, you see yourself changing over time when you start reviewing your stuff. So if anybody is interested in just saying hi to me, because, you know, I know a lot of you. Hi. Hey. You guys can get a hold of me at www.leonor.com. And, yeah, just kind of get a hold of me and say hi. And, who knows? Maybe we could do a video or something together. I'd like that very much. So until the next reunion show, or whenever Braxwolf has me back on, I'll see you guys later.
Now, episode 8 was a topic that I felt at the time and still do feel is very important within the gaming community, something that is not talked about very much. It's fitness, and specifically gamers and fitness, and people who are fans of movies and fitness. You know, any of these hobbies that are very enjoyable but not very active. I think it's something that you have to make sure you have some kind of physical balance there with the sedentary habits that we get into with these types of hobbies. And as the obesity rates in my country continue to climb, I think it's something that we probably need to talk about a little bit more. And I was happy to have on my show Carrie from the MMO Reporter Network and Sig, who's a friend of mine from Twitter and also used to do various blogs for Elder Scrolls Online and whatever game he was playing at the time. And one thing that was notable to me about this episode was that it was the first time I actually had multiple guests on at the same time. And really, if I had a preference, if I did this professionally, I would prefer to have 3 guests on every single episode. I think 3 is just about a great number for any podcast because it takes the pressure off the host, it takes the pressure off the guests. It helps the format flow a little bit better. When it's just a single guest and an interviewer, you tend to get into this kind of habit of, okay, I ask a question, you answer a question, I ask another question, you answer another question. So with 3, there's a lot more interesting things you can do with jumping in and out and things like that. You get a little bit, if you get any more than 3 people, it tends to become a little unwieldy. But this is something that I did for a few episodes of Beyond Bossfights, but not very many because it was just difficult to schedule one person, let alone 2 people that were probably all in different time zones at the same time.
Hi, Beyond Boss Fight listeners. This is Carrie Mack from Loter Reporter, and I just wanted to congratulate Braxwolf on 2.5 years of producing Beyond Boss Fights. Keeping up with the podcast isn't an easy thing to do. It's a real labor of love for those of us who do it, and to do it consistently for that long is it's almost a part-time job. So again, congratulations, Braxwolf, for 2.5 years of Beyond Boss Fights. And you had asked us to kind of give you an update of what's going on and what we've been doing since the show. I am still doing Loter Reporter. It's sort of pod-faded right now. We are not as regular as we used to be, but we do keep trying, and we're trying to get schedules together to do it. I've moved from video games more to tabletop games, and I'm actually doing some play-by-post online for Pathfinder, as well as playing Pathfinder Society about once a month, and actually getting to GM some games with the Pathfinder Society. You know, and that takes a few hours on a weekend, which was my usual video game gaming time. I am still trying to gamify my fitness. I have been using apps like Zombies Run and Couch to 5K to get my exercise in. I really like Zombies Run. I encourage people to check it out. And people who know me know that I do not like zombies, and I actually can't watch like The Walking Dead or anything like that because I get nightmares. But for some reason, listening to the stories of the people and their survival is kind of fun when you're trying to move your body outside and do some fun stuff like that. And then I remember when we were on the show, we were talking about standing desks and options for that. And I just want to let everybody know that I have now a standing desk at home, which I'm actually recording this standing, as well as work. So I do a lot of my gaming and my web surfing and stuff. I do stand instead of sit, which makes a big difference in how I feel. So I would suggest if you can figure out how to do that, that might not be a bad idea. He also asked if there were any major changes since the show. I have completed 3 5Ks since I was on the show. One was not really for time. It was an inflatable 5K, which was super fun, except that it was the only day in the month of July in Seattle, Washington area that it rained. So I was soaked, and a lot of the obstacles, the bounce house obstacles, were too slippery to climb. They would have been tough for me to climb anyway, add in slipperiness, and it just was not going to happen. But I did finish it, and I had a good time. And then I did one at Christmas time, and I finished it in 48 minutes. And then I just did one last Saturday. I flew to do one with my sisters in Missouri, in Branson. They live not far from there. And I finished in 46 minutes. So I'm shaving some time off my 5Ks, and I plan to keep doing those because they are a lot of fun. I'm also in the gym several times a week. I train with a trainer once a week, and then I do a boot camp kind of CrossFit style class on Saturday mornings, which is awesome, wicked fun. And I've been known to flip a tractor tire or two myself. So yes, the topic that we talked about is still very important to me. I'm enjoying very much feeling better, moving better, doing things that I didn't think I could do, like, running, walking 5K, 3.1 miles in, 42 minutes is pretty good for me. What do I remember about doing the show? Well, I loved talking to Sig and Brax about the topic, and we just had so much fun hanging out. It was such a great time visiting with those guys, getting to know them a little better, and just having a fun visit with them. And you asked if there's anything that you wanted to leave the listeners with. Well, part of the reason we haven't been recording Lotra Reporter is I had some family stuff going on. And one thing I want to say is, while you have a chance, get healthy. Gaming is a fun hobby, but move your body some too. It's totally worth it to do that rather than being ill and not being able to recover from something that may happen, is what I will say. And again, congratulations, Rockwood. I hope you have another 2.5 years of Beyond Bossfights.
Episode 9 was a great episode. I had DJ Pimp Daddy, and I think at the time he was asking to go by Andrew. He was in kind of, one of those phases he goes through where he was erasing his identity and, anyway. The funny thing is, in DJ's recording, you're going to hear in a minute, he makes reference to the fact that at one time, episode 9 was one of my most downloaded episodes. In fact, I went back and checked the statistics. It is still my most downloaded episode. And I think the reason is pretty clear. Not only was DJ a great guest, and is a great guest, but he had a great story. In fact, he had 2 stories, and they were both of a demise of a popular online community. And people love to hear stories. This is one of the reasons I like doing podcasts, is so that people can tell their story. And he had 2. And not only did he have a great story, but Scott Viper, who was one of the people that was involved in DJ's Minecraft and podcast community, did a follow-up YouTube version of the same story. When he heard the podcast, he wanted to give his side of the story. And there was no animosity there or anything, but it was really cool to hear his side of the story on his YouTube channel. So we kind of co-linked to one another. It was just one of those times when after the podcast was released, the story wasn't over. It just kind of kept going for a while. And so I think that's what made this a really good episode, was people enjoyed hearing the kind of that tragic fall of the gaming community, so to speak.
Greetings all from Andrew, aka DJ Pimp Daddy, your eccentric visionary. After appearing in episode 9 of Beyond Bossfights, I was actually tickled later to hear that for months it was one of his more popular episodes. It kind of made me laugh that the whole topic was about destruction. Anyways, I'm hoping that record's been beaten, because there's been far more interesting topics that Brax has tackled. Since the show, I've done a length of time where I just simply vanished from the internet and played my games. It was great. My sons and I hung out more and life was grand. Eventually, I was suckered into doing the XP Quest podcast by Andang, and we're about 8-ish episodes in right now. Unlike previous shows, I've vowed to record things on my time and not sweat putting out regular weekly content. I'm sure much to Andang's ire. It is, after all, just a side hobby, and I'm clearly not wanting to do this for profit. It's amusing knowing that my show topic was all about destroying communities. Then here I am, a year later, with another one. #sigh. I do have to admit that this time around I did learn my lesson, and I clearly defined my work-life balances. Perhaps I matured. Perhaps I might insert a fart sound right here to prove my maturity. If there is one thing I can say I learned from the dozens of shows that Brax has put on, it's that no matter who the guest, everyone is always fighting a losing battle against time. Having less responsibilities or guilt for not putting out weekly content gives me more time to play games with my boys who are slowly becoming little hackers. I swear my 7-year-old knows how to boot a Linux distro from a thumb drive. I'm surprised I haven't gotten any angry calls from the school district, actually. Any day now, though. Recently, I've actually been struggling with both the logistical and mental willpower challenges of selling off all my old retro games. The few people that have seen what has been deemed as Smog's horde of NES and SNES carts in real life were shocked that I decided to part with them. I considered blogging the various stages of grief as I progressed through them in this lengthy process. But as I noted earlier, that blog was deleted. Irony? So, in closing, take time to relax. Let life in every now and then. Take breaks from technology. Let your creativity scream. Remember to always stop and smell the flowers. Make sure you pick them, because you might be able to make potions from them too. Sorry, I've been playing way too much Oblivion. Brax, definitely congratulations on your 2.5-year extravaganza. And keep up the good work, man. It's a good listen.
Congratulations, Brax.
Okay, go back to your Legos.
Episode 10 saw me interview my first and, as it turns out, only gaming developer, Joey Wiggs, from Flying Helmet Games. Joey had an interesting background. He started out as a developer for Microsoft and eventually moved on to independent game development. And I thought that was a cool story to tell, and I was interested in how he made that transition and what he found appealing about the new world of indie game development. So we had a really cool conversation. He's going to recap most of it in his recording here in a minute. The other thing that was notable to me about episode 10 was it was the first time that I tried the What Are the Kids Playing segment. And it became a long-running segment on Beyond Boss Fights. The last few I haven't been able to do it because of time constraints and difficulty scheduling with my own kids, believe it or not, with all the activities that they're in. But I really enjoyed having a conversation and listening back now to Broadkill's very first What Are the Kids Playing. He sounds so young. It was, almost 2 years ago. And believe it or not, kids have changed an awful lot in 2 years. So it was fun to go back and listen to that little squeaky voice once again. At any rate, here's Joey from episode 10.
Last time on the show, I had just gotten into becoming an indie game developer. I was 3 months in and it was shiny and new. Today I'm a good 2 years in, and while it's no longer new, it's still pretty shiny. I've learned an immense amount about game development, specifically from my coworkers as well as working on my own. I've also done a lot of personal and work travel. I got to go to Amsterdam to show our game at Casual Connect, which was amazing, and I've worked the show floor at PAX West 2015 and PAX East 2016. I went to Toronto for Christmas, and I went to PAX Oz in Hawaii for Halloween. My blog, Gamer by Design, is still around. There are a lot of articles from my time being an indie dev, more so than other gaming articles these days, but yeah, I'm still slowly going bananas from working at home all by myself. I really do miss working with, coworkers in an actual office, but I wouldn't trade my time as an indie dev for anything else in the world. On the podcast, we chatted a lot about the transition from being a dev at a huge company like Microsoft to a tiny one like Flying Helmet Games. And even though FHG is even smaller now than when I was on the podcast last, I definitely had us adopt a few of the bigger team processes that I learned in the past, especially around shipping the game itself, areas where we just can't afford to screw up, right? Trying to adopt things that make sense and aren't around just to slow people down. But one of the things that has changed is, holy cow, I'm a game developer now. It's hit me since, and it still blows my mind that I get to apply my skill set in programming to an area that I'm still passionate about today, being gaming. It's amazing. One of the other things we chatted about was if I felt different about gaming since becoming a game dev. I have found my gaming habits to change pretty significantly. I do less incidental day-to-day gaming on my PC since I'm often busy making a game instead. I mean, I play a fair amount of casual mobile stuff, but every once in a while I get to binge on something a little more hardcore. It's not that I'm tired of games, far from it. It's just hard to justify sitting my butt in my chair at home all night when I'm sitting my butt in my chair at home all day for work. So instead I just try to get out for more board games, or I play more mobile games instead. We've had a lot of time to work on the game Eon Altar, and it's taken longer than we expected. In the podcast, our original plan was the first half of 2015, and it's May 2016 as of this recording, so take that as you will. As a studio, we grew to around 27 people, and then we've shrunk to around 4 or 5-ish active folks today. I've been the only programmer on the team for the past 10 months, which means I've gone from having others to bounce ideas off to being the person who has to know everything technical, be it coding new features, automating the build system, or being tech support and debugging people's networks over forum post. Not recommended. I rule over our code base with a velvet-gloved iron fist, though. All that extra time has paid off immensely from a polish and feature standpoint. We were nowhere near ready in mid-2015, but when somebody thinks indie dev, quotes and all, we're probably the closest now to that image than we've ever been before, with folks scattered to the four winds and many of us having day jobs to keep the lights on. I did a bunch of interviewing myself to see if I can get another game dev job, and it's taught me a lot about interviewing and about what I do and don't know. Despite having some offers, a few stars aligned, and right now my personal full-time focus is getting Eon Altar out the door in good shape. And what good shape we're in. We crushed Steam Greenlight in May of 2015, getting voted onto the island after only 6 days. We've been in Steam Early Access since September 2015, so 9 months or so, and Early Access has been amazing for getting more test coverage and player feedback on our features. Especially now that our studio is so tiny, any extra eyes is a good thing. We've shown at a bunch of conventions, PAX West and East, Casual Connect, DreamHack Austin, to name a few, starting to get our name out there. As an indie dev, I think that's been the hardest part, marketing, getting noticed. Most everyone who has noticed us thinks Eon Altar is super unique and cool. Watching people play our game on show floors is unreal for feedback. On Steam, we have about an 87% positive rating, which is pretty good for a game in early access. It's just getting the eyeballs at this point is really hard. However, we're incredibly close to release. In fact, by the time this airs, we should have launched the game for real. Or if not, we should be close to it, which is stupid amounts of exciting. For those not in the know, Eon Altar is our mobile enhanced co-op RPG, so local co-op, PC tactical RPG, but instead of controllers, you use your tablets or cell phones as your controller. Since everyone has their own screen, we can give you secret dialogues, missions, and thoughts. And PCs are voice acted, but you voice your own character. So we sort of aimed for an experience that cleaves quite close to a more traditional Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder tabletop experience. The main game is on PC or OS X, and mobile devices you can use iOS or Android. If that intrigues you, wander over to our Steam page. You can just search for Eon Altar, E-O-N space A-L-T-A-R, and Steam, and you'll get there. If the game speaks to you, buy it. We'd love the support. You can also follow us at FHG_games on Twitter. If you want to hear more about the indie dev experience direct from the source, you can follow me personally, Talarian, at TalarianJS on Twitter, so Talarianjs. Or you can check out my blog, Gamer by Design, which is at talarian.blogspot.com. Thanks for having me on again, Braxwolf. It was a blast the first time and so cool the second. Happy anniversary.
We probably entered into maybe the best block of 3, 4, 5 episodes in a row of Beyond Boss Fights, and I kind of feel like this is the point where the show had completely hit its stride, and I really knew what I was doing, and I was not running short on ideas, and everything was flowing really well. Starting with episode 11, which was about social and gaming, and I had on my show Lonram from Anook.com. Ran right into episode 12, Video Game Lore, with Joe Bradford from the Gaming the Industry podcast. Then we had Blogging and Game Journalism with Justin Olivetti from, at the time, Massively.com, which was only a few months before Massively shut down, and we didn't know any of that was coming, so it was kind of a shock to hear that just a few months after I had interviewed him about what he did at Massively. Then I had Sil on from the MMO Gypsy, and we talked about cultural challenges. Sil, somebody who I was admired for her ability to speak and write in English when it wasn't her native language. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that and also about some of the cultural challenges that she faces in a gaming culture which is typically more English-focused. Then I had another good three-way conversation with Murph from Murph Versus and Dune from the XP Chronicles on are there good and bad video game studios? And I will just let them speak to this because they both sent me some recordings to play for the anniversary show that I thought were both pretty good.
Hello, Beyond Boss Fights fans. This is Murph back from episode 16. First, let me begin by saying thank you, Braxwolf, for having had me on the show. I had an amazing time talking about video games and game studios with you and Dune from XP Chronicles. The discussion has stuck with me ever since, as has your podcast. It's amazing how much passion and dedication you put into it with each and every episode. I'm so honored to count myself both as an alum and to be here today to celebrate such an amazing milestone. No one in our community is more deserving than you, Braxwolf, and I really look forward to the future of Beyond Boss Fights. As for what we talked about back in episode 16, we discussed the goodness and badness of game studios, and there's still a lot of conversation worth having about the topic. If anything, things are even more charged today than they were then. There's still debates about the depiction of women in video games. There's still arguments about monetization. Somewhat recently, in the last few months, there was the issue with legacy servers with World of Warcraft and with them shutting down a illegal vanilla server for the game. I mean, there's so many different conversations going on, especially this year, about video games and their cultural impact and their social impact and their economic impact. And whether or not you think these conversations are about the goodness or badness of these game studios, some people do feel that way. Some people think that these are moral issues. And in some cases, I'm inclined to also follow that line of thinking. As we move toward 2017 and as Beyond Boss Fights moves to the future, I see no shortage of interesting and meaningful discussions to be had about video games and the culture that surrounds them. I certainly will continue to maintain my small corner of the internet over at my blog Murph Versus. In addition, especially lately, I've been writing more and more for MMOgames.com. They'd probably hate me if I didn't take a chance to plug them. If you're an MMO fan, definitely should check them out. They have a whole host of authors there who also happen to be some of our more prominent blogging members here in the community. So there's a lot of different content being generated over there from the blogs that I think is pretty interesting. Not only do you get different reviews on MMOs and MOBAs and esports and games like that, but you also get some news as well as other general opinion pieces. Beyond the blog and MMOgames.com, my overall goal is just to have fun. Video games are a hobby for me. I may sink hundreds of hours into them, either playing them, talking about them, tweeting about them, or writing about them. But at the end of the day, it's still something that I may one day walk away from. And it's important to keep that in perspective. But these are not issues that I feel are limited strictly to video games, even if that's the area in which I'm primarily discussing them. People ought to feel represented, whether it's in a video game or something else. People shouldn't be taken advantage of by aggressive monetization or other unfair business practices. Whether these are questions of video games or whether they're questions of any other company or product or area of our lives or our culture, I think they're important. They're worth discussing, they're worth debating, and they're worth arguing about. And again, that is exactly why we need podcasts like Beyond Boss Fights. Podcasts that aren't afraid to talk about these subjects, that aren't afraid to showcase the difference of opinion, that aren't afraid to go deeper into more serious areas and not limit the discussion solely to reviews or whether a game is good or not or what we're playing this week. Because frankly, Brax, I'm not sure I would really be here celebrating with you unless I thought your podcast, your dedication were worth celebrating. And for that, for the chance you gave me by letting me be a guest on your show, by giving me an opportunity to speak once again to your audience, to your fans, to your family, I thank you greatly. Thank you for everything you do. And thank you for continuing to do it. And as I said before, I look forward to wherever Beyond Boss Fights goes next, wherever you go next, because you are a genuine, nice, kind, and caring individual. And I'm reminded that we need more people like that in video games and video game culture. Every time I make the mistake of looking at a comment section or looking at the big uproar of the moment or playing League of Legends with anyone that isn't someone I know already. Happy anniversary, Beyond Boss Fights, and happy anniversary, Braxwolf. Here's to many more anniversaries to come.
So, hello, Brax. Before I answer your questions, I have two I want to address for myself. The first is, you may not remember, but a few years ago I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And so for the past few years I've been on and off different medications. And listening to that podcast, wow. Not a good time. I sound terrible. Not that I sound any worse now, but I am off of one of those medications, and that's helped a lot. So maybe I just sound old. That could be it too. So the first question is, what have I been doing? I've been raising a small football team, and that's been a lot of fun. It's not like playing video games, as I'm sure you know, but it's been good. The worst part is not being able to do anything that I've been doing over the years with my blog and with gaming. With kids, it's like you have one, and it's cool. You know, your life doesn't change too much. You think, oh, I'll have one more, but the thing with babies is that they don't scale linearly. So it's not like, oh, I'll just add one more of this and you get sort of the same amount of baby in your life. It's exponential. You have one kid, it feels like, oh, just one. But if you have two, it feels like 4, and 3 feels like 9. And I have 4, so yeah, it's kind of a time consumer, to say the least. But I do miss my games, and I miss my gaming conversations. Last year's conversation on the show was really fun. It was really good. It took a while for me to remember it, but it's not for lack of interest. It's just I've got a lot going on. Have there been any major changes the past year in my life or with anything? This year, my youngest baby turned 1. And I have found it interesting to consider. There was a section on the show where we talked about Blizzard, and I think since then Blizzard has shown they've gained a little improvement in hearing. I think they've been deaf for the past 20 years, but it seems now that they've gained some hearing. It's very little though. Remember that about the time we did the show, it was a year or so from then, that Pardo had a interview at, I can't remember what university or school it was, might have been MIT, where he basically said he didn't care about diversity type issues, that, you know, whatever they're doing, it's fine. And this very year, in 2016, Blizzard changed an artistic pose of one of the Overwatch characters, no doubt under some pressure from fans who called them out this time on their allegiance to sexist art. And so that's a change. Blizzard very, very rarely responds to fan feedback by changing anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It's progress. It's not the progress we want to see. I think a lot of us want we don't want to die and see no progress. But it's you have to acknowledge it. So I think they're moving, and I think the fact that they're moving shows how much movement there is in games in general. So there have been major changes actually the past year as far as developers hearing a lot of feedback from the community on social issues and deciding it's a good time to really do something truly creative and different. I think we've seen a lot more protagonists that aren't white dudes. I think we've seen a lot of successful games without white dude protagonists. I think we've seen more gay characters. Dragon Age, I guess almost a year and a half or so, used Dorian as their marketing. That was their marketing gig, the gay guy. So there's still some improvement to go with, but I think a year ago we weren't here. That's for sure. So there have been some big changes. They've been small all over the place, but in the aggregate they've been huge. So what do I remember about the show? Well, before you asked me, apparently the answer was nothing. But having listened to it, I remember sitting there and not trying to tease Murph. He doesn't say thing. He's from Alabama, if I recall it. He says thang. He said that the whole show. And I remember wanting to laugh about that, but I didn't. But we should laugh about it now. I think we should do the show again. And we should really let him just do Alabama. That would be a lot of fun. It would be truly great. But also, having listened to it again, I remember wishing at the time that we'd do a part 2 to really go over these questions you're asking us right now. What have I been doing lately? Well, now that all of my children can walk, I've been trying to carve out that space for games again. It's a very tiny space, but I miss it a lot. And I have no intention of surrendering it forever. This is definitely a temporary dry spell in the blogging and in the gaming. As for projects, I've been doing a lot of work revamping the blog. I've been working on a format that matches the kind of scheduling I can do, and the actual format to change it up a little bit so that it's easier for me to keep up with it with my new realities. Anyway, I am still extremely thankful, and I feel very, very humbled and honored that you had me on the show, and hopefully it won't be the last time. So hopefully we'll do it again sometime. And thanks for following up. I look forward to the next Beyond Bossfights.
So with episode 17, I went outside of my comfort zone a little bit, and probably outside of the comfort zone of a lot of my listeners as well. It was the first time I did a podcast about filmmaking instead of, something video game related. Although I did tie some video game stuff in. I had as my guest Ron Newcomb of the Forge Studios, an independent filmmaker, and I thought it was a really good episode. I don't know, like I said, that my audience responded to it because it was the first time I stepped out and did something a little bit differently, but I'm glad that I did it, and I think it gave me a lot of good experience, and it also kind of gave me the confidence to step out and do stuff that's non-gaming related, which I have done lately, which I think has been important for being able to sustain the show. In episode 18, I had Bragg, son of Balin, on, and he is the creator and producer of the Light the Beacons podcast, which is a Lotro podcast. Still back in the Lotro community we go, I guess. Bragg is one of those guys that I knew about and had been listening to his show for quite a while and really enjoyed his style and his sense of humor. So I wanted to get him on the show, but I didn't really have a good topic. Sometimes I had a topic that I had to find a guest for, and sometimes I had a guest in mind, but I didn't really have a topic. This is one of those times where I wanted to get Bragg on the show, and once I did, I certainly was not disappointed.
This is Bragg, son of Balin, and you're listening to
a Beyond Bossfights reunion segment.
The beacons in Minas Tirith! The beacons are lit!
Braxwolf calls for aid!
And Bragg shall answer.
Welcome back to the Beyond Bossfights Anniversary Reunion Spectacular, a TGen podcast focusing on an actually polished-sounding product. This is a random catch-up segment, and I am your host, guest, Bragg of the Lonely Mountain, the Warden of the Warning Beacons, and Dwarf of Ill Repute. Brax asked if I would be willing to record a quick take to relate what I've been up to since I guested on his show. The content we covered at that time was based on a topic I originally broached in my podcast to discuss how and why I keep my personal and professional online personas separate from my gaming persona. And yes, I can confirm that I still do this. Why, you ask? Obviously, you've never listened to my podcast. I can confirm that I do actually have a job, and that I'm even occasionally taken seriously by my coworkers, something that would never happen if they listened to one of my April Fool episodes or one of my song parodies, such as Bjorning's Got Back. So my reasoning here hasn't changed much, and apart from that, I'm still chugging along some 52-odd episodes in to my podcasting experience, with perhaps the biggest change being a recent relaxation of my recording schedule to be maybe every 3 weeks or so instead of 2. Is this a loss of enthusiasm, you might ask, or just a coincidence based on a busy life that includes 3 school-aged children towards the end of the school year, an extended vacation, and finally the acquisition of Season 4 of Game of Thrones on DVD? What can I say? Life is very full. But I still play Lotro more than I do just about anything else, and I'm actually excited about what the game may be bringing over the next 1 to 2 years. I do mix in other games as well as I can. Equally, if not more enjoyable than the games themselves, is the almost daily interaction with the community that has built up over many years, until it has become a welcome daily distraction or even respite that is often very fulfilling indeed. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Brax personally for being a big part of that, and to say I'm hoping that it continues for many years to come, regardless of what the future brings along on Steam or elsewhere. That brings us to Halifaerian. It's time for Blessed Relief, the end of the Beyond Bossfights reunion segment of LTB. I would love to hear Braxwolf's plaudits, feedback, rants, diatribes, and most of all, his kids. You can contact me at braggsonofbalin@gmail.com. That's Bragg with 2 A's. The second A stands for anniversary. On Facebook or Twitter at braggsonofbalin, or my website at lightthebeacons.com, where I can shamelessly plug my own show. I kindly request that you take the time to create Braxwolf an iTunes review if perhaps you're so inclined. He would very much appreciate it. If your comments incite him to invite me back somewhere down the road, I'd be honored to oblige. So I hope you laughed at Brax, and I hope you might have learned at least a little something you didn't know before, or perhaps looked at Beyond Bossfights with a slightly different perspective. Most of all, I hope you enjoy your week in Middle-earth or whatever other realm you roam. This is Bragg, son of Balin, signing off. Baruch Kazad. And remember, the next time Braxwolf decides to host a 2.5-year anniversary episode and asks you to submit a recording the night before you leave on a 2-week vacation to Europe, don't despair. Light the beacons.
Okay, Bragg, in my defense, I lost the link to your personal Google Calendar, so I'm sorry I didn't know you were leaving on vacation. For episode 19, I had a topic of quitting your MMO, and this is something that's near and dear to people who play MMOs because they've most likely quit once or more, an MMO or several MMOs across the board. I had as my guest Sean, who I first heard on the Lotro podcast, Lotro Academy. He used to be a co-host on that show. Really enjoyed him on that show. One of the primary reasons I used to tune in, and was very disappointed when he decided to move on from podcasting, and was delighted to find out that he was a co-host later on down the line on the Contains Moderate Peril podcast, which I was also a big fan of. And that lasted a little while, and then he was gone from there too, so I had to get him on my show in order to get him on a podcast again. Anyway, I thought, again, I was really happy with the way this show turned out. Sean is one of those other people that I had on my show that you just kind of wind him up and let him go, and everything he says seems to be interesting for some reason, so I was really glad that he accepted my invitation, and I think he enjoyed being on as well.
Hi guys, this is Sean. You may remember me from the Gaming Conjecture website and sometime member of the Contains Moderate Peril podcast team. These days, perhaps quite appropriately, given that my guest topic on the Beyond Boss Fights podcast was quitting an MMO. I'm not really playing MMOs anymore. These days, mainly playing single-player games, and I'm certainly not part of the MMO blogger/podcasto sphere. But congratulations, Braxwolf, on reaching this many episodes, and good luck for the future.
Well, episode 20 of Beyond Boss Fights was actually a TGN tribunal, so there wasn't a whole lot of planning on my part that went into that, but was very happy to be able to host that for my month, as all of the TGN members take turns doing. But episode 21, I wanted to tackle the question of how has gaming affected your real life, because I know for a lot of people, gaming is more than a hobby. In fact, especially for people who get involved in the community and possibly host a podcast or a website, fan site, forum, anything like that, it tends to have a lot more bleed into your actual real life. And for this, I had my longtime co-host from Lotro Players, Draculetta, on, and we had a really fun conversation between the two of us. And he mentions in his snippet here about being nervous for the show. I didn't realize he was nervous about the show, and I have no idea why he would have been. But I think it really came across well. Drax obviously got background in radio and podcasting, so whatever nervousness he had, he did a great job of masking that night. And we also learned a few things about Drac. And not only is he a busy DDO player and a website hoster, he also was into tabletop gaming as a youngster, as well as heavy metal music. Actually, our backgrounds, I came to learn, weren't really all that much different, although he was probably more into the gaming side of things at an earlier age than I was. I guess that's what happens when you're similar age and similar demographic. You find you have more in common than you might have thought.
Hey, Beyond Boss Fights listeners, it is Draculetta. I am here on this reunion show just to let you know a little bit about what I have been up to since I was on Beyond Boss Fights with Brax. It was quite a while ago, actually, I was on. Let's see, the major things I've been doing since the show is doing a lot of game reviews and interviews with game developers and the like for the site DDO Players, which I'm the head of. Any major changes I've been experiencing since I've been on the show? Not really. Kind of the same old, same old. Still trying to, balance all the work that I do on the podcast and the site with, my real life responsibilities, which is kind of tough, but we kind of talked about that on the show. Because the topic was how has gaming affected my real life, and we did say I've spending a lot more time doing this. It's actually amazing how much time it takes to run a website and produce a podcast, as I'm sure Braxwolf very well knows. And I would say, is the topic that we talked about important to me still? Yes, very much so, because I'm trying to learn how to balance what's going on, because I'm getting a lot of contacts with game companies now that they are sending me games to review on the website. So that is one thing that I guess my gaming has affected my real life, is it's causing me to game more, if that makes sense. Not many people can probably say that, but... And what do I remember about recording the show with you? I remember I was super, super nervous for some reason. I don't know why, because I've done podcasts for a long time. I did podcasts with you, Brax, for a long time. But that's the one thing I remember. I was super nervous about doing that show. And then I remember it kind of took a weird turn, and somehow we got started talking about heavy metal, which I don't know how that happened, but it made for an interesting show. So if people don't know what I'm talking about, you have to listen to the episode, because it was kind of strange, but it, I guess, reflected me, so it made sense. And like I said, I better tell you what I've been up to lately, just basically, podcasting, my websites, my real-life job, boring stuff like that. And then I do have a big project coming up, and that is going to be in August. DDO Players is, of course, going to be covering the Gen Con Gaming Convention once again. I do have my press pass for that, so looking forward to that. We're going to be doing a lot of interviews with game developers at the show, at their booths. We're going to be showing off some new games, going to be playing a lot of games. I'm planning on doing video of playing the games at the booths, and we also have some interviews and some other special game time set up with some of the developers, where we're actually going to get to play the games with them and, of course, videotape that for the website. And I would just like to leave the listeners with just have fun, whatever you're doing. If you're gaming, have fun. That's what it's all about. Don't take it too seriously. And congratulations, Brax, on your 2.5-year anniversary of Beyond Bossfights. I swear the show just keeps getting better and better every episode.
For episode 22, I wanted to tackle kind of another interesting real-life video game crossover topic, leadership, because I've seen the benefits of leadership within games kind of translate to the professional environment, which is kind of an interesting thing for me to watch and witness. So for the guests, I had on two people, Ali, who I know is a very dedicated kin leader in Lord of the Rings Online, and Jessica Cook, or Lior, from the Herding Cats blog. You may have also heard her on the MMORPG.com Game On podcast a year ago or so, who I know who was once a very active raid leader within MMOs and now has a very successful professional career. And I wondered how some of these skills that they had learned or were learning had transferred into that professional environment, or how they believed they would. I just kind of wanted to have an overall conversation about leadership both within games and outside of gaming. One thing that stands out as a memory for me for this podcast is that it was one of those times where getting three people together was really difficult. And in fact, we got together at what I thought was the agreed upon time, and due to the fact that we were all three in different time zones, Ali actually showed up, I don't know, it was a half hour or an hour later than I expected him to, and Jessica and I had waited around for a little bit, and then we decided to go ahead and record, and then Ali popped on, and so it was kind of a challenge for me to slide him into the middle of the conversation and continue as though it was kind of a free-flowing discussion. But everything, all ends well. How do you say that? All's well that ends well. And at the end of the day, it turned out to be a pretty good episode. And I take full responsibility for not communicating the time correctly to both of my co-hosts that day.
Hey Brax, Estelle here, leader of Casual Raiders. Congrats on your 2.5-year anniversary. Woohoo! I remember our conversation on your podcast. It was really nice talking to you and Jessica about leadership and hearing your views on it and sharing mine. How important a role a kinship leader has. Since then, we have continued to grow in numbers, and my job is always to make sure that the people we get agree with our ideals that we set for our kinship. It was never about being the largest kinship on the server, but always about having a group of close-knit, good players, and above all, and more importantly, good-hearted people. I also chose some new kin officers in hope that with this new responsibility, they too can grow as people and develop leadership skills. Our kinship sadly suffered a huge loss when one of our dear kin members and friend passed away. It was a really hard moment for the kin as a whole, and we were all in shock. We can't imagine what his family went through, but it's a loss that brings people together and show their true quality. Capovina will be missed and always remembered by Casual Raiders. Rest in peace. Since most of you and the listeners of your podcast and the Lotro Players podcast know me as a poet, I write poems. So I continue to write more poems on my blog. Our kinship recently celebrated its 2nd anniversary. We had a big party on our kin house, and we also invited Lily Kate and her band, the Nini Hammers, to come play for us. It was a really nice concert they did for us. We were also really pleased when not general manager. I think I messed up, but I don't feel like recording it again. The game master, not general manager. When a game master plus Moose showed up unexpectedly to our party, and he made a bunch of fireworks for us, and it was really cool. It's moments and little things like these which make the whole Lotro experience worthwhile. Since last time we spoke, our kin members have also started recording our raids, and including myself, so it's been a fun experience being a YouTuber as well as a blogger. If anyone is interested, they can search for Casual Raiders on YouTube and find our videos and about different raids and instances for Lotro. So, if anyone is interested, they can also follow my blog at dgenxali.wordpress.com and follow me on Twitter at dgenxali. You might be wondering, how do you say it? I say it as dgenxali. It's simple. If you say it like 5 times, it just rolls off the tongue really easily. Just kidding. I'd like to end with a quote from Professor Tolkien, which I really love and admire. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. Hope to talk to you soon, Brax, and again, congrats on the 2.5-year anniversary.
Hi everyone, this is Jessica, aka Lior, from episode 22 of Beyond Bossfights, which was on leadership in gaming. So, I secretly always wanted to be invited on Beyond Bossfights because I love guesting on good podcasts, so I was thrilled when Brax invited me to come on the show. What I remember most about our recording is that my Skype was a little touch and go, which is totally unlike Skype. So, to be honest, at least half of what I said in the podcast was me guessing what Brax and my fellow guest Ali were talking about, and then trying to figure out what I could say in response. So, as it stands, the show actually sounds great, so consider it a testament to Brax's editing skills. Since that episode has aired, I still refuse to take any leadership position in gaming. But fortunately, thanks to Slack, I don't have to run a guild anymore to hang out with my old World of Warcraft friends. But is the leadership in gaming topic still important to me? I think it's more that its absence is important to me. The social aspect of MMOs is no longer a priority for developers and players. On the one hand, it's contributing to the decline of a game genre that I love. But on the other hand, I don't have to beg people to sign up for raid nights anymore. So, you can still find me on Twitter at HeyIt'sLior, and Cat Context, my rambly, shouty podcast about video games and bad Canadian television, is on Twitter at Cat Context. Anyway, happy birthday, Beyond Bossfights. Here's to 2.5 more years of intelligent, interesting podcasts for grown-ups.
So we're coming up on the end of the 2.5-year extravaganza. I just got a couple other episodes to go over. One is episode 23 that I did with my son Loco Wolf. It was all about Star Wars and our kind of relationship with Star Wars. The toys that we played with, the video games that we played with, our relationship to the movies and things like that. His viewpoint as a younger person, and mine as somebody who's been around since almost the very beginning. I can assure you that Loco Wolf is doing fine. He's not going to make an appearance today, but he just graduated from his freshman year of high school. I guess it's not really graduating. He just finished up his freshman year in high school and is doing well. He's upstairs playing World of Warships as we speak. Now, the last episode I wanted to go over was episode 25, which was done with Roger Edwards and Brian from Well, the Contains Moderate Peril podcast, Burton and Scrooge Stage 1, and more recently, Burton and Scrooge Uncut. Several podcasts that I have followed very closely, and they've both become very good friends of mine. I thought I'd let them have the last word since they came on to kind of talk about closing up the first iteration of Burton and Scrooge onto my show. Gave them a sense of closure, I felt anyway. They've since opened up a new podcast, Burton and Scrooge Uncut, which is supposed to be, once again, hopefully a simplification of the editing process for Roger, and also a much more relaxed release schedule for the show to keep them going for a longer sustained period of time. And I certainly understand where they're coming from with that theory. So at any rate, I'll let them have the last word as my final recorded guests for the show.
Hi, it's Roger and Brian from Contains Moderate Peril / Burton and Scrooge / Burton and Scrooge Uncut podcast. And we'd like to say, first of all, happy anniversary, Brax. 2.5 years of outputting quality content. That's quite an achievement, Brian, isn't it?
Yes, I'd like to add / way to go / keep going.
Yes. Don't become one of those awful podcasters who keeps on announcing that it's all too much for them and they're going to quit, and then a couple of months later they decide that they're going to do it again. Because those people are really annoying.
Oh, I hate those people.
Yeah, they're just so inconsistent and whiny. So, 2.5 years. Well, a lot's happened. I was originally on the show, Brian, in May 2014, and when the talk was communities. And the thing is, there still seems to be quite a thriving blogging and podcasting community that we're part of, isn't there?
Yeah, we're usually happy to be part of it.
We've seen things like the Geek to Geek podcast recently sort of made quite an impression, and there's another MBI being held this year, and that means that there'll be a fresh injection in the arm of the blogging community. So I'd say that the discussion that was had 2 years ago is still proving to be relevant, that everyone's still getting on and doing the job in hand, which is nice, because you always do see a few people move on. It's inevitable.
I just think it's part of the natural cycle of life and of gaming and podcasting, right?
Indeed. As any podcaster or a blogger would tell you, it's committing to something and putting out regular material is hard work. It's fun, but it's hard work. And I'd just like to say, thanks to Brax for just putting out over the last 2 years plus consistently good show. The guests have always been varied, and the discussions have always been very broad and covered a great range of subjects. And that's a gap in the market has now been filled by a quality show. So I do hope you haven't got any plans, Brax, to stop doing it, as it were.
It's okay. If he stops doing it, he'll be back in a couple of months anyway, so it wouldn't matter.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think the status quo is like at the moment, Brian, as far as podcasts and shows and blogs? Do you feel that they're holding their own against the move towards streaming?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a place for more reflective content.
Mm-hmm.
More editorial content, I guess you could call podcasts. Streaming's neat, but it's I think podcasts are kind of on a surge right now nationally, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it's streaming is entertaining and fun, and I can see its appeal, but I often find with blogs and podcasts it gets very personal in a good way. And you build a rapport up with the person whose work you're listening to or reading, and I find it a little bit more fulfilling than watching streams and stuff. Although streams can be, as I said, entertaining. It's nice to check in with people that you look forward to their output, and you feel that you know them through their output. So there you go, 2.5 years. It's, we'll raise a glass to the next proverbial 2.5. So thanks very much, Brax. Keep up the good work, and we'll be in touch when we quit another podcast.
So as we've been listening back to and catching up with all of my past guests, it kind of strikes me as how fortunate I've been to be able to interact with so many people within the blogging and the gaming community, and how many people I've been able to get to know a little bit better and form relationships with, and kind of even expose to the world. They're their personalities and their artistic abilities, their intelligence, and it's quite a diverse but talented group of people that we've got. I think maybe that's the one thing that I take out of these past 2.5 years, through all the difficult scheduling times and the time spent editing and the late delivery of some of the episodes, and possibly putting aside some of my gaming hobbies in order to put time into some more creative things like editing the podcast and promoting the podcast. It's the relationships that I've formed throughout, not only with the guests, but some of the listeners as well, and other people within the blogging community, that's really been the best thing to come out of the whole experience the last 2.5 years. And I'm certainly grateful for that. And if you've been a part of that, and if you're listening to this, you have, thank you so much for that. I'm glad to be able to also give some of these folks a little bit of a boost, however little it may be, when they come on my show and talk about the things that they're doing, the things that interest them, some of their creative efforts. And to that end, I'm going to go ahead and insert our T-Gen show of the week here, Cat Context by Lior, who you heard earlier in the episode.
Cat Context is about 3 friends getting together twice a month to talk about MMOs, RPGs, nerd culture, and really good virtual hats.
Cat Context is my bi-weekly attempt to find a subject that Arrow is not randomly an expert at, and to instead make fun of Lior for being so wrong all the time. Also, games and movies and stuff.
Cat Context is about trying to be hilarious in 10 seconds or less. Or is it fewer? I think it's fewer. Fuck, I'm out of time.
Cat Context. Games, movies, and smart talk twice a month.
Well, if you made it this far, congratulations. You've come to the end of the 2.5-year anniversary special of Beyond Bossfights. Once again, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in for the last 2.5 years, including this episode. And I'd just like to say that while I may not be real consistent on release dates or the format of the show or even the types of topics that we cover, I have no intention of closing up the show. I have too much fun doing it. I have too much fun interacting with people and seeing what the feedback is that comes back from folks after they listen to the show. Speaking of which, if you have feedback, you can send it to braxwolf@gmail.com. That's BRAXWOLF. And I will read it on the show. Just a reminder that Beyond Boss Fights is on iTunes and would appreciate your ratings and reviews. Beyond Boss Fights is also on Stitcher and Player FM, so add it to your playlists. As far as contact information goes, you can follow me on Twitter at BRAXWOLF. You can email me again at braxwolf@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook or YouTube, and of course you can always find everything on my blog at braxwolf.com. Thanks everybody for sticking with me, and I will see you for the next 2.5 years.